Hey guys, my guest today, James Martin, is going to be talking about early exploration of the Americas. See you in about 5 minutes. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great day. Today has been a day of Murphy's Law for me. It's like with this show, we're live right now, so hopefully, since we're on, you will come. For some reason, I had it on the 14th of June. I don't know why. I screwed the days up, but that's okay. We're on live now. This is the scheduled day, so I'll let you guys know I was going on at noon last night, so you guys should know it. I have one person watching, so far we're good. But I apologize for that. And then I was trying to do some work with Corel today to get some extra graphics in for the show, and none of that was working. So it was just one of those Murphy's Law types of days. So everyone, I have faith in you. You will find the show tonight, so I'm not worried about that. Anyway, my name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour, I hope, the way it's going. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you have a paranormal issue or you think you might have a paranormal issue, and that includes UFO sighting, things like that, cryptid sightings, anything like that, we can get to you. It might take us a while. California is this huge state, so even though we have people in certain spots within the state, there's a lot of rural areas, so it might take us a while to get to you, but we will. And what I mean by a while is maybe 1 or 2 days, then we'll get to you. In the meantime, I have mediums on staff who can phone you and talk to you about what you think is going on. And if it is, in fact, paranormal, they can, in most cases, settle everything down until we're able to get out there. Okay? So check us out. You can find us on Facebook. That being said, welcome. And if you're watching from Facebook today, we hope, please be sure to hit that like button, smiley button, happy face. Because the whole thing is the more of those you hit, the better it is for us, in that there's an algorithm on Facebook. And when you do that, it puts us up higher in the algorithm. So other people from outside of Facebook can watch, there are even more people on Facebook. So that's what that does. Also, if you haven't done so already and you like the show, and let's say you're sitting at home and you're kind of cruising, drinking, having your lunch, and you can think, wow, this is a pretty good little show. If there's someone else in the house, call them on over to check it out, because we're always looking for followers and stuff. We're trying to build this thing up. So, hey, Mom, come on over, check this out, right? So please be free to do that. And if you haven't done so already, follow us on Facebook, okay? Because like I said, we're always looking for followers. That goes for YouTube, too. If you're watching from YouTube today, be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. And the same thing with the smiley faces and the thumbs up and all that. That puts us higher in YouTube's algorithm. And you've been going really well. And I think a lot of these likes and stuff that we're getting are doing that. So I'm real happy. Okay, that being said, if you want to find California Haunts, you can find us really easily. We're all over Facebook. It's all over Facebook. Just type in California Haunts or California Haunts Paranormal, and it'll pop right up. And plus, you can find me on my personal Facebook page, which is public, so you can check that out. You can find me over at Instagram under Ghosty Gal. That's all lowercase. We're over at TikTok under California Haunts. We're at Twitter, I believe, under Cal Haunts. It could be California Haunts. There's so many of them, it's hard to keep track. And we're also over at Twitch as well. The other thing is I want to thank Lynn Monet for having me on her show last night. A nice 2-hour chat with her. It was really fun, and I see my video is freezing up. See, anything that could go wrong today is going wrong. Okay. So what I'm going to do, nothing is working today. Okay, I'm back. This is how the day is going to go. This is how the day started. This is how the day is going to go. I can tell you already because my video just froze up. Okay, I'm just going to have to go with the flow, and so will you. It's just going to be one of those days. But anyways, I was saying I was on Lynn Monet's show last night for 2 hours chatting about the paranormal and about a lot of my adventures through the paranormal. And once I get the link for that show, I will put it up for you guys to check out. It was a fun show. I've known Lynn for a while, so we had a good long chat, and we have a real good rapport. So we were just chatting, like going back and forth with it. Saturday, I do have a class I'm teaching. That's at 3 p.m. Pacific, and that's going to be for protection for yourself, your animals, your house, and things like that. And the class is going to be kind of different because I'm going to talk about all the cool gemstones that they have that are out there. And what you might not realize is some of these gemstones will help, supposedly. I'm not going to say will because I'm not a doctor. Okay, don't get me wrong. I'm not a healer. I'm just saying this is what I know from doing this for years. Some of these gemstones have healing properties, supposedly have healing properties. Like there's actually one they call the kidney stone because it helps with your kidneys, and there's one for your blood pressure, and there's one for your heart. So I'm going to be going over all that for you guys. And in addition, I'm going to teach you guys. When I go on investigations, I like to have protection. I do have a blessed cross that I wear, but I also have a medicine bag. And I made my own medicine bag, and you can too. And I'm going to be teaching you how to make your own medicine bags. I'm probably going to start making them and selling them online as well. Okay, if people request them. But I'm going to be teaching you how to make medicine bags, talismans, things you can hang in your house for to protect your house, and how to make things for your animals to protect them. Because sometimes bad energies will come in and maybe go after your dog or cat, right? So I'm going to be teaching that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, head over to the California Haunts Meetup, California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team Meetup. And all the information's over there and the events listed over there in the event files. Okay. That being said, if you haven't visited our Patreon, you should. It's patreon.com/California Haunts Radio. Patreon members get exclusive footage. And what they get is when I shoot a pre-recorded video, you get to see it 2 weeks in advance before it hits the main show. So that's one of the pluses. And Lynn Monet is going to, people like Lynn Monet and Nancy Matz are going to come back in to do one-on-one talks over there. So they'll come on for like an hour over there. And if there's a question that you had for them that maybe during the show that you didn't get in, that kind of thing, feel free to go to the Patreon and ask them. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to do one-on-ones over there. So I'm coming up with all kinds of different things for Patreon members. And if I get, once I build up the numbers, I'm even going to have giveaways. We're going to have giveaways of California Haunts material. We're going to, California Haunts stuff like T-shirts and stuff, and ghost hunting equipment. I'm going to give away ghost hunting equipment. So that'll be for the subscribers over at Patreon. Okay, that being said, I'm really excited about my guest today, James Martin. A couple of years ago, when I was first started doing this format, I had a gentleman on, and we were talking about America's Stonehenge. And I don't know if you guys are aware that America actually has a Stonehenge. Nobody knows how or when or how who built it, right? But it's there, and that tells you, what that tells me as a closet historian, because I love history and I love humanities and the whole thing, in school. It tells me that somebody was here way before Columbus, because America's Stonehenge, yeah, just like it says, it looks like the Stonehenge over in England, across the pond, and it's very it's a very interesting topic, and to think that maybe the Vikings or somebody were here way ahead of Columbus, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool thought. So my guest tonight, James Martin, is going to talk about that, and I'm real excited about it. So without further ado, I'm going to bring James in and let him introduce himself to you guys, and then we'll take it from there and just go with the flow. All right, give me a second here.
Hi, Charlotte. How's it going?
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thanks. You'll have to excuse me. I've just come out of hospital and suffering from a bit of hay fever, but I'm sure all good to go.
Cool.
I'm loving the cap, by the way. I think that's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully nothing else goes wrong today. It's been one of those days.
Honestly, it definitely. You were just saying in the intro though about Murphy's Law, and I thought, yeah, I'm damn straight that's been the case this week. So yes, there we are. It's not just
so tell me about you, sir.
Worst person to do introductions. I'm an historian. I've worked in finance, employment law. I'm currently a lecturer in history, economics, and politics. I've taught out of Ruskin College at Oxford. One person who has the affliction that some people accuse me of being too academic, and I don't like that. But with a background really in classics, currently writing a further book further three about the Knights Templar, which is sort of a bit of a departure, but not quite away
Mm-hmm.
from the book that's out at the minute, Uncharted, which is looking at pre-Columbian transatlantic exploration, which, if you've had a few orange juices of an evening, is a little bit of a mouthful, really. But really, the first discoveries of the Americas.
Fascinating. And how does one get interested in this type of history?
Well, for me, it was actually doing my masters. My co-author, or the person who really set the book in motion, Tim Wallace Murphy, who's no longer with us. I was doing my masters, and in something boring for most people, which is economics, history, and politics. I was looking at the Norse trading networks across the Atlantic. And it's not just rumors, but really, what had actually happened. The United Nations has agreed there's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a Viking. And just say this to everyone listening: Viking is a job title. It means something like explorer or trader or something like this. Try not to associate it just with pillaging and plundering. Most certainly they did get into that, but really we sort of mean explorer. And they had established a essentially ship repair facility in northern Newfoundland, Canada. And I was interested in what was going on with trade. The Norse and or Vikings, whatever word you want to use, were essentially island hopping. They arrived in Britain and then Iceland, and then or Eastland, then Grönland, Greenland, and then ended up in the Americas. And I was actually interested in, and my topic matter was to do with unicorns.
Okay. Okay.
Unfortunately, if everyone just got excited about our beasts, our mythical beasts, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to let you down gently. Charlotte, do you know anyone who owns a horse?
Yes.
It's really expensive, right?
Right. Real
Really
expensive.
expensive. And if you cast your mind back to the 11th century, the 1000s and before, where there's a battle for survival for most people, having a horse is really expensive. Now, the myth of the unicorn has been around since ancient Greece, if not beforehand. But what the Norse were doing is they said, well, we've discovered on our island hopping adventures, I'm just paraphrasing this, by the way, everyone. But we've discovered that there is a flying horse, and not just that, but it has ivory. It has this huge tusk emanating from its head. And myths and rumors of this beast traveled across Europe. Now, at the time, ivory was being imported from Nigeria and Africa. Quite a dangerous voyage. But the Norse had, the Vikings had said, well, we've actually managed to capture these flying beasts. And of course, because we can capture these flying beasts, if you think owning a horse is expensive, imagine capturing one of these. This requires extra skill and therefore extra cost. And we can get the ivory and we can do all of this. And for me at this point, I'm looking at the explosion of what we understand as the unicorn as it explodes across Europe, firstly in Iceland, then Scotland. If any of your listeners are in the United Kingdom, you'll see on the Scottish or the British pound, one part of the Scottish national animal is the unicorn, and then in Norway, and then Sweden and Denmark, and ended up being part of a group of 23 people who were investigating an odd myth. The Swedish throne, the old Swedish throne of the Kingdom of Sweden, was made out of unicorn ivory.
Wow.
And anyway, it wasn't me doing the drilling or anything like that. This is part of a expert team. who did some analysis on it. And unfortunately, if it wasn't the unicorn, what they found is it was actually narwhal. So these are the big whales that you find with a big tusk from their head, the narwhal, only found within the shorelines of northern Canada, Baffin Bay, etc., Hudson's Bay, etc., and across New England, Newfoundland, and Nova Scotia, which in a strange way just demonstrated that what the Norse were doing they were keen whalers, and they were just pretending that, oh, well, we found this horse and all of this. But what was interesting is just how far that had traveled, and that was really my subject matter, looking at how they were trading, what they were doing, and in this sort of unknown land. And that got me speaking to a father-like figure in Tim Willis Murphy. And he'd explained that there was this project that he was working on, a sort of sequel to a book he wrote called Templars in America. And we're crossing notes. And he said, well, edit the book, dear boy, if you want. And it became apparent, I said, well, Tim, I perhaps need to add a few things for clarity. And he said, add what you like. I can always get rid of it afterwards. And that really was my involvement in the book, and really my interest in our topic matter tonight.
Absolutely fascinating. This is a fascinating story to me. So please go on.
Well, it sort of led from there, really. I mean, firstly, when we look at history around the world, history is often taught with the national myth. So in the United Kingdom, it's a case of, Britain has never been, Great Britain has never been invaded since 1066, the Normans. But it's not true. They were invaded by the Dutch in 1668. In fact, the King of England was someone called William of Orange, a Dutch king. In Canada, the myth of that country, not much myth, but it was founded by the Brits. And in the United States, you have this idea of Columbia, the dove, or Columbus. Columbus was first, and that suits, certainly a lot of Hispanic and Italian immigrants and all of the rest of it. And that's fine. The problem with these myths and these national myths is it never really is the truth. And unfortunately, when we're in school, and I know it's the same in the States as it is in a lot of Western countries, history, I ask people, do you like history? And, I'd say about 9 out of 10, something like this, saying, oh, no, I don't like it. And when you explore why, it's because they're taught names and dates and leaders and war, as opposed to our history, the history of just ordinary people, and which is much more interesting. And like I say, this is just one of the reasons that that we wrote Uncharted. It's not there to educate you; it is there to provoke you, and to provoke you into thought. I'm not suggesting that we have all the answers in the book, but it should prompt some questions for you. Some things for you to figure out, and that's the whole point of it, really. I know it's California Horns. It's to ask the question: is this place haunted?
Right.
Does this exist? It's the question. The answers sometimes are obvious. Does gravity exist? Well, of course it does. And if you don't believe in gravity, don't tread near a cliff. There are some answers that are really obvious, but there are also times that we should healthily question. It's not about taking something away from someone in our answers, but to explore, and that really is what history is.
When you talk about early explorers, I mean, people need to understand that, like for us, when we think of early explorers, we're thinking of Columbus coming over. But there was a lot of stuff going on way before that, right?
Well, I've just mentioned the Vikings, the
Right.
Norse, a place called Lonsa Meadow, which from French into English means something like Jellyfish Cove. There is a UNESCO, a globally accepted site with archaeology that dates to 1000 AD. Now, as I say, it's a ship repair facility in essence. So I should just explain the Norse had names for North America. They referred to one place as Helluland. Oddly enough, it might be where we get the word hell
Right.
from ultimately in the English language. But Helluland means something like, in this instance, stony, nothing can live, which we would perhaps accept as being sort of Elizabeth Island, Baffin Island, these very rocky, barren wildernesses. Then there was a place called Markaland, the wooded place, which is probably Newfoundland, sort of northern New England, southern Canada, that kind of idea. And then they spoke of another place called Vinland. Now, some people have suggested this vin or vin, as it is in French, meaning wine. It could perhaps mean something like the wine land, but it really doesn't sit well with the Norse. We're perhaps talking about a place fertile enough to have vineyards, etc. The fertile place, which almost certainly is New England, if not a little bit further south. And that's just the Vikings. There are many other explorers before their time.
I find it interesting because when you think about people like Christopher Columbus, he obviously had a sextant, or he had a compass. What were the ancient explorers using? Were they just doing it via the sun or the stars? How were they able to get around?
Charlotte, I'm not sure whereabouts in the world you are, but my advice for anyone listening is to, if you're in the United States, try and find one of the very flat states.
Okay.
I think you're going to shout at me if I say places like Idaho, maybe, some of the Great Plains and all of this. And just find somewhere that's very flat, lie down and look at the heavens. Two things you can do. Try and draw the heavens. The only shape you will make is a circle. That could be important later. If not, appreciate that what you're seeing is the TV set of the time. If you live in a city, you perhaps don't notice what's going on in the heavens. There's lots of light pollution, for example. You perhaps people don't look up in cities to look at the architecture, let alone the skies. And so any changes in the heavens were noted. And so our ancestors used the heavens much more so than perhaps sextants and all of the rest of it. I mean, prior to Columbus, they used the heavens to navigate. I had an interview with someone who became an acquaintance who was from Polynesian descent, and I said to him, wow, the entire Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean, in fact, larger than all land masses combined, the Pacific Ocean, it's huge. How on earth, where are the maps? And he said, no, we don't map. We know where the stars are, and we sing our way from island to island. You have to know the song. Our society thinks that we're the pinnacle. And the previous generations were somehow inferior to us. It's really not the case. Yes, we have sanitation and we have electricity and we have some things they didn't have, but there are also other things like noting where the heavens are and how to navigate by stars that we wouldn't do today. Imagine the lights go out. Charlotte, you're probably like me. If you have to travel somewhere, I get my phone and just type in, and satellites do all the rest.
Right.
And all the rest of it. But that's only in the past 20 years. prior to that, you'd need to know the map, or you'd need to know where you were about the stars, and that's how they got around.
It's just like I said. I've seen stuff on the History Channel, about this, and to think that with that technology. In fact, there's that group of Hawaiians that built that sailboat, that big catamaran thing, and they're circumnavigating right now the same way.
Polynesians, yeah,
the Polynesians, like the ancients. It's just incredible to believe that they were able to get as far as they did. Like if you talk about the Vikings getting all the way to the United States, what would be the United States, it's amazing that they were able to maneuver through all that.
Well, with the Polynesians, for example, again, one of the things that it is in the book, but perhaps people aren't necessarily aware. There were some DNA tests undertaken of the inhabitants of Easter Island with the big Rapa Nui. They very famously, the big stones, which look somewhat haunting, actually. And then people have dug beneath and seen that actually they're not just the heads, the full totems, but like Göbekli Tepe, actually, in many ways. Yet, DNA testing took place on Easter Island, and just for reality's sake, Easter Island is at its closest point is 2,290 miles west of the country of Chile. Now, here was the interesting thing about this DNA study, because what it said is that the people of Easter Island owe their origins, or at least owe part of their origins, to people from Colombia about 800 years ago, somewhere in the region of 1200 AD, something like this. We can never be 100% exact when we're looking at DNA, nor can we with carbon dating. It's always a sort of range, really. But let's say 13th century, around 1200. What's interesting is that the DNA is evidence to Colombia, but not on the Pacific side of that country.
Okay.
The Caribbean side. Oh,
interesting.
So, you've then got other studies such as sweet potatoes seem to have arrived in Polynesia around about that time. So for me, if you've got DNA evidence and then botanical evidence, it's pretty obvious that around about the 1200s, the Polynesians are clearly trading with, or at least know of, the landmass of South America. And yes, that's slightly after our Viking friends, but it's certainly, in 1492, Columbus discovered nothing new. And remember, we don't take away from the Americas, North, Central, and South America as a continent, the people who were already there. What we're actually describing is a sort of rediscovery of the Americas.
Right. So to be an early explorer like this, can you describe, possibly what it was like for them to be out, on the oceans doing this? Because I'm sure, the sailors themselves that were involved had a lot of trepidation, being out there, because you don't know what you're going to find.
Yeah. So the Irish, there's a few, I find them quite humorous, but a few accounts there. There were hermits living in Greenland and Iceland long before, 4th century, long before the Vikings got anywhere near them. When the Vikings turn up, one of the Norse sagas describes how quickly they went. I think they saw which way the wind was blowing. We know that the Irish were fishing off the coast of Newfoundland in the 7th century, the 600s AD, in carracks. These are whaleskin boats. The answer to this is, if your survival depends on fishing and food, etc., then you will make the extreme call. The idea of it being cozy sailing is is nonsense. This is really, really, really difficult. Navigating by the stars, not really knowing what to expect.
Right.
It's only when people return that you get a bit more comfort that it's possible. I dare say this for the Irish, our Celtic ancestors. It would have been very difficult traveling, not just overseas, but life-threatening. We know that they did this, though. We can tell from fish bones where they got the Atlantic cod from. We even have some depictions of, and this is their language, not the one that I would use, but their descriptions of red-skinned people arriving on the coast dead. Now, that might be people who were caught in the trade winds, as they are. Perhaps Native Americans who ended up being blown off course, that kind of idea. This is very difficult. They don't have the comfort of or knowledge of things like when you're on a long voyage, having vitamin C. To prevent scurvy. They don't have the knowledge of where you're getting foodstuffs from. This is all sort of guesswork. But if the Irish were going over, and as many later cultures did, go over to fish there, just think of it like this. You take the fish out and you've then got a few weeks sail back. The fish has gone off. It's rotten. So they must have landed to salt the fish.
Right.
Because if you salt the fish, you can preserve the life. It's the same reason we have some hams and bacons and things like this. It preserves the life. So it might be in the future we find some of those sites. They are elusive to us at the moment, though.
And then what else comes to mind with this is these vessels they were in weren't very big.
No, not at all.
And when you think about like the ships we have now that are crossing the ocean, I mean, there's some big waves out there. There's some huge stuff. So they had to get through that too.
Well, certainly that's true for the Irish, and I'm not suggesting that they made landfall. I'm just suggesting that if they were fishing that far out, they would needed to have salted the fish.
Right.
Actually, for our ancient Roman friends, the size of vessels, and even Egyptian before them, we know, for example, that Roman galleys were exceptionally large. And I'm just reminded, for example, it was the Emperor Nero, I think, who brought over a obelisk from Egypt and created by that point one of the largest vessels that we had seen to that point. And I think from memory, this vessel could handle around about 1,350 tons. And another thing just to keep in mind is the distances travelled. The Roman Empire spanned, it was about 4 months in length. If you wanted to go east-west, north-south, it's about 4 months. They occupied Africa, Northern Africa, right the way up to Britain, and perhaps even further north, like in Scotland. The Strait of Gibraltar to the Gulf of Iskandar, the Mediterranean Sea, is about 2,500 miles. Meanwhile, the distances from Africa to South America is about 1,600 miles. So what we sort of need to do with the Roman idea is to say, after the collapse of Rome in the west of Europe, it's certainly true that the carracks, these well-skinned boats I've just referred to, yes, ship sizes decrease. But, again, a wreck that was found off it was off the coast of France, or Gaul, as the Romans referred to it, was 130 feet long and had a capacity of 440 tons. This is around about 10,000 amphorae. These are sort of vessels. Look a little bit like a vase or a vase, if you will, would carry oil and wine and things like this. So it could carry about 10,000 of them. And again, Caligula built a larger vessel, 1350 to 1450 tons. So the Romans and the Egyptians and Phoenicians before them had much larger vessels because they had a much larger territory, a little bit more knowledge, that kind of thing.
Well, that's why I'm glad you said that, because like, you know, when I think, like I said earlier, when I think about, say, the Vikings, you know, coming across, I think about the smaller vessels, and I'm glad you cleared that up. That the Romans had these big vessels to get across, because I mean, it would have been really difficult, you know, really difficult in a smaller vessel to be able to explore.
Yeah, absolutely. Now the Vikings had, I would suggest, suitable vessels. They are island hopping, so some of the long boats that we know about had flat keels to go through rivers, but would likely be attached to a larger longboat which had a more deeper keel for ocean. I mean, the Vikings tended to, when they were traveling and when they could, stay within 2 to 5 days worth of coast. They tended to see where birds were and, you know, hug the coast in their travels. The Romans, however, if you imagine, you know, from today's Lebanon and Israel and the Black Sea even, traversing the entirety of the Mediterranean, had again suitable vessels that were larger enough to weather storms. Not that all of them did, by the way. You know, we know these from wrecks, but yeah.
Well, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, like I was just thinking about the Legend of King Arthur too, when France came over to, or England went to France to fight, and vice versa. They had big boats because they were moving their troops around.
Oh well, you've got to be careful when you talk about Arthur from Cumbria, where we have our Arthurian legend. He was king of the Britons, and the Britons were the original inhabitants of the island, but eventually, after Rome occupied Cumbria, Scotland, Western Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Cornwall, and Brittany and Galicia in northern Spain. But yeah, and oddly enough, I've in my next book about the Templars, I've just given a little nod to King Arthur, so very present. I just wrote that chapter a few days ago, so very much in my mind right now.
Well, that's what I think of, because, you know, it's all been Americanized, right? You know, over here, and so that's the way we see it in the movies and whatnot, and that's what came to mind. But I'm really, you know, I'm really intrigued by this, you know, the ancient travelers that like I said, that they were able to get as far as they did, because, like you say, some of them were focusing on island hopping, essentially, you know, to continent hopping, so they could stay closer to shore. But for the ones that traveled like clear over to here, I mean, that's huge. It's huge.
Well, if you think about it, it's not really, if you're island hopping, so if you're the Vikings, it's not really that difficult. Britain, the Faroe Islands, then Iceland, Greenland's just over a very difficult channel. Canada is then within, again, a difficult channel. And then you're hugging the coast. It's not really that difficult in that way. If you think about the Polynesians, now that's impressive, and we know they did it. So, you know, we've got the DNA to demonstrate it. The Egyptians, there's a big mystery with them. So there was his name was Gunnar Thompson. He was around in the 1940s, 50s, and what have you. And he, he ends up exploring a number of tombs, including that of Ramses the Great. and notices that there are depictions of maize, corn, in other words.
Corn,
and I keep on asking this in various interviews because I get in trouble. Charlotte, how do you like to cook your corn cobs? I boil mine, but some people are very, very insistent. No, it should be grilled and all of this. But I boil mine. What about you?
I do it both ways. So I will boil it sometimes, and I will grill. I'll even microwave.
Oh, I've not heard that one, so never mind. Now, look, when you boil corn cobs, you notice that the corn cob drops straight to the bottom of the pan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can rule out this idea that somehow corn cobs are floating along the surface of the ocean because they would just sink. And even if they could, the salt water would ruin any crop that they could produce.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we then have a slight problem, which is, why do we find over 1,000 depictions unmistakably of corn cobs? Now, some people have spoke to have suggested that there are depictions of tanks and helicopters in hieroglyphic records. Now, my response to them is, well, I won't and can't necessarily rule that out, but I would need more than one. Because it might be that we've perhaps not understood, these. When you're talking of thousands of corn cobs, where maize, in other words, which only grows in the Americas, then we sort of need to come up with another explanation. How did that happen? And it just so happens that a few other bits and pieces were going on. So if we just go back to 1976, there was a PhD, Dr. Michelle Lescott she was at the Museum of Natural History in Paris. And she received a sample of, again, Ramses the Great, or Ramses II, if we're being correct, to study essentially the conditions that either led to his death or life, even. It was just an explanation. And what she found when she was using a microscope, a scanning electron microscope, is that there were grains of tobacco, or tobacco, as I would say, clinging to the fibers of the mummy. Now, we can, if that was just, again, isolated, what we could say is, well, yes, Victorians didn't know about isolation, preservation, didn't really consider the need to keep things preserved in a way that we would understand today. But that then led her to understand this lack of isolation, that perhaps it would be worthwhile to send other samples and perhaps get some other mummies, as we would perhaps call them, to be tested. And of course, that's what she did. And then we just sort of have to move a little bit further on to the 1980s and 90s. And some, I can't remember if it was the exact sample or there was another sample, but the key player in this is Dr. Svelta Balabanova, and she's a forensic toxicologist, and she's at ULM. And she'd obtained some samples from the digestional tract of Ramses, rather than the sort of external layers of fabric, right, as you understand. And what she found was almost impossible, and certainly is at the time, because she found in the digestional tracts, this is something that couldn't have been exposed to our wayward Victorian friends, but she found within the digestional tract traces of tobacco, yes,
wow,
but also cannabis,
huh,
cocaine,
wow,
coca, etc. and were in the cellular matter, as she described it, like rings in a tree, is what she said.
Oh.
Well, naturally, this is just a one-off.
Mhm.
And despite her reputation, she then sends. Well, she builds a sort of team internationally, including from the University of Manchester, not too far away from where I grew up. Paris and in Cologne, Munich, etc. You know, this really, and even including in New York, to ask them to take some chromatography tests, as they call it, on a variety of mummies. And he was over 300 mummies were tested, and 2/3 of them came back positive for cocaine,
Wow.
tobacco, coca, and cannabis, opioids. And so it really put a big question. This is known to historians as the mystery of the cocaine mummies. So it's still a mystery. Now, here's the thing. If you're finding evidence of maize in the thousands, in burial tombs, monuments, etc., you're then finding cocaine, opioids, etc., cocoa plant, in other words, which only grew in the Americas. We've got two explanations for this. One, well, we can't explain the maize, but archaeologists and Egyptologists have got a really bad drug problem. Or the pharaohs and others in Egypt were having a really good time. And with the bulk of evidence, I think that, you know, well, my thoughts lie with, well, we've got maize, we've got all of this, you know, this isn't so much of a mystery. They were clearly trading.
Very interesting. I never really looked at the cocaine mummies before. I'm going to do it now. That's for sure. After you say that. Wow. Wow. My other question, you know, were that's concerned. I mean, if they were doing this stuff, could it be? I mean, like we use opioids, of course, for pain management. Technically, for pain management, could it have been that they were using them for similar things that we are?
Yeah, well, what we know is that there were, you know, if you look at the Oracle of Delphi, you know, Delphi, for example, it just means dolphin, by the way. We know that various of the, specifically the Sibylline oracles, you know, I love this phrase, and I forget who it's from. They pronounce their utterances. I just like that phrase. I must remember who it's from. Yeah, they were giving their thoughts in a mind-altered state, and what we now understand is they were in particular caves because of volcanic gases that led to an altered state. We know the priests. This is a temple culture in Egypt. The pharaonic lines, for example, we know that they used mind-altering substances. They described it. So I'm not too surprised to find that you know there's evidence of that within the digestional tracts, for example. Not too surprised at all.
Even the Native Americans here. I mean, you know, back in the day, we're using peyote to talk to the gods. You know, so I mean, it is a widespread thing throughout the world.
Yeah, I mean, from hemp, I mean, ayahuasca. You know, there's plenty of evidence for this. And actually, you know, let's not just focus on that of the Americas. I mean, we can actually extend this to the Aboriginal cultures of Australia, or Australia as we would know, but you know, including that of New Zealand. You know, yeah, they were occupied, settled, I should say, around 1300. We know that there's particular ideas there. In fact, you'd be hard pressed to find a culture that wasn't looking at mind altering substances to access the divine or whatever their belief systems were.
Right.
Doesn't matter. So why we'd think that's different for our ancient friends and ancestors, I'm not too sure.
So, like you say, a lot of this stuff came from the Americas. So either they were trading with with the indigenous species over here, or the species, God, the indigenous people over here, or they were actually, making those trips. So maybe the trips were going on both sides as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, this really is the key. It's all fair and well for us to say, well, we might have evidence of this, of the Chinese, of the Romans, and what have you. Well, that's fine. The key point is, did they make it back? So it sort of brings me on to Robert Marx. No relation to Karl, I understand, but Robert Marx, and he was, I should say, a marine archaeologist. He was later disparaged as being a treasure hunter, and this appears in the book, by the way. He had got rumors from fishermen who were operating outside the port of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, in a place, I think, again, this was in the 70s. I think, again, it was 76, actually, or 78. The fishermen, it started to call this place the Bay of Jars, because they kept on finding clay jars. And, as a marine archaeologist, he went to Brazil. He got a license to dig and did all of this. What he found was not only a lot of shipwrecks, but he also brought up 2 jars with twin handles that taper at one end, and that is the unmistakable shape of what are called amphorae.
Right.
And I've mentioned this before. Amphorae, if you see them, you automatically have dug up thousands of them. It feels like it, probably not thousands, but in official digs. But these jars, and it's the telltale sign of Roman activity, or at least Mediterranean activity. And I understand that he got some of them carbon dated, and they came back sort of plus minus 100, but 2,000 years. And of course, as any responsible archaeologist would do, is you report any findings to the government. I suppose what he wasn't expecting then, this is 1982, having obtained permission, and this, I think the earliest date for one of the jars is 19 BC. What he wasn't then expecting was the Brazilian government to cancel his digging license and then expel him from the country. Now, when he returns, he sort of, what was all this about, and returns to his dig. I think this is later 80s, if not early 90s, perhaps, and finds that the entire dig site has been silted over.
Wow.
With sand and clays and all of this. Now, here was the key thing. He had began to find evidence of 2 Roman galleys shipwrecked. Now, unofficially, government sources had said, well, here's the issue. We couldn't possibly have had an important discovery as it is, but what we couldn't have accepted, and Brazil's under a dictatorship at this time, was that Brazil was in fact discovered by pagan Romans, when Brazil is a Catholic nation. And I think it was Cabral who discovers Brazil in 1500. And again, you think about it, this interrupts that national myth. These are the things that you must be taught and all of that. I keep on saying, I'm a lecturer. What I could very well do, Charlotte, is say to my students, right, we're not going to be learning about all of this, so scrap it all. I'm going to teach you something else. I could do that. I'd last about a week, and then I'd be wondering how to put food on the table next month, because almost certainly I'd be out of a job. If your job depends upon you repeating the same narrative, your choice is like this. do I continue to heat and feed myself? Do I continue to tell the story? You know, and that's the reason I think that a lot of these national myths just keep on getting regurgitated, and despite the absolute evidence, governments around the world, the United Nations, have at least accepted that the Vikings, the Norse, were the first. I think we'll keep on pushing that back. You know, again, if you want to read Uncharted, you know, Google Uncharted James Martin or Uncharted Tim Willis Murphy. It's on Audible if you prefer to do what our ancestors used to, which is tell stories through oral traditions. Have a look on Audible if that's what you want to do. It's not there to give answers, just to provoke questions.
Right.
I think in the grand scheme of things, we should at least acknowledge the people who came before us.
Right.
Why on earth do people look up the genealogy, the family trees? You know, it's not about remembering some sort of great historical figure. It's because it's important that we know where we've come from. And if we ignore that, then you know, history doesn't repeat itself. It just gives us lessons so that we might not make the same mistakes. That's really the key to it. And it's very difficult to do that if we've got a Columbus Day. Now, look, Columbus was not the most pleasant of people, but not even I can say, if it wasn't for Columbus, we wouldn't be talking.
Right.
It's just true. You know, he never stepped foot in North America. He only set foot in Caribbean islands and then perhaps in even South America, but he didn't step foot in North America at all. What he did do is pave the way for the colonization of the entirety of the continent, of the Americas, and that history is well documented. You know, so it's important that we at least remember that we're in our society today isn't the most important nor the most advanced. There were cultures that came before us. We should remember them, and why shouldn't we remember them in that way?
Absolutely. This hour has gone by. I'm just so fascinated talking to you. I love talking about this stuff, and I really appreciate you coming on.
No, absolutely any time at all. It's it's getting into the evening where I am.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
Well, I'm currently writing a trilogy of books around the origins of the Knights Templar. Because it's me, it started back in ancient Rome, and that should be out early, if not middle, next year. Hopefully, again on Audible, etc. That's up to the publishers. But really, the rise of the Knights Templar, who they were, really, where do relics come from? Why did the church dismiss Mary Magdalene as a prostitute when actually the origins of the church were founded with women? You know, what happened there, and really talking about that. And then up to the Crusades. Then what happened after they were disbanded? I'm not writing the bit in between. If you want to find out more about the Templars and what they were up to, there's thousands of books on that. I'm not interested in me writing that with my slant on it. But what happened afterwards? And the third is why do we still talk about the Templars? What impact do they have today? And the titles: Order of Magnitude. You know, the rise, the fall, out of order, and its impact today, last orders. So that's what's next for me.
Fantastic. How can people find you, sir?
If you want to get in touch, you can get in touch by email, which is info@newrennies.org. New Rennies is spelled NEWRENNIES. I will always try and get back in touch as soon as I get the email, but sometimes it's just not possible. That's info@newrennies.org, or you can go onto the website, which is newrennies.org. As simple as that. Like I say, I will always try and come back to you. Just remember when you're emailing and all of this, differing views are absolutely fine. I would hate for everyone to have the same opinion.
Absolutely.
And, you know, if you want to email with a difference of opinion, just remember, however, I'm not going to respond to anything relating to hate.
There you go.
We don't have enough time in life to invest our time in hate. So if you
go.
want to get in touch, feel free. If you have a different view to me, it doesn't mean I think you're evil or hate you or anything. That's absolutely great. In fact, the more of that, the better, because it's how we learn. But just be respectful is what I would say.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I would love to have you on in the future to talk more about your new books, more about this topic. I just think it's so fascinating. And I love the fact that you came on. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, Charlotte. It's been, thank you for having me.
All right, sir. You have a great rest of your evening, okay?
Thank you very much. Good night. God bless everyone.
Good night. All right. That was terrific. I love history, and I could talk to gentlemen like this all day. Just about different topics. Tomorrow we're shifting gears. We're going to be back at our usual time slot at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. We're going to be talking with Steve Silva about ET communication, and he's got some interesting things to say about that. So I want to thank you all for coming today. I really appreciate it. At least finally the stuff that was going wrong settled itself down. I'm glad, and now So this is going to be available all day for people and to see. Let me make sure. See, I'm on my other mouse too. My mouse isn't working either, so I'm having one of those days. So anyway, for people that are working and stuff, and I know you don't have time to get to this, you will be able to reach it on the RSS feed, and it'll still be on my Facebook and over at YouTube. So I want to thank everybody, and I appreciate it. And I'm just going to sign off before something else goes wrong today. Have a great rest of your evening.